In this episode, I dig up an old recording. And when I say old, we recorded it at the end of 2021 over at the SafetyPro Podcast Community. We had a member panel discussion, and we talked about the smash and grab robberies, that whole trend that is still going on at the time of this recording, and its impact on worker safety and how the media and all of the coverage is really focused on how to protect the stores and merchandise. That's sort of the basis of this conversation. But here's the problem. There were a series of storms rolling through. I myself had nothing but high winds. My internet was glitchy in and out. And we were, all four of us on this panel were in different locations across the U.S. And we had some major tech problems. I did my best to edit this. I thought it was lost forever, and one of the members actually prodded me to say, hey, you know what? Who cares? Whatever it ended up looking like and sounding like, we probably still covered a lot of great info, and they were right. We got some good info in this episode. The full video you can see. You don't need to be a premium member. Head over to the SafetyPro Podcast Community site. The link will be in the show notes for this video, and you can watch the full video and see for yourself. It was crazy. I think I was on like sub dial-up speed at the time. It was insane, but we pulled it together, and I wanted to make it available to all of you in podcast land. So get ready for this episode. Before we get into today's topic, I want to remind everybody, if your business is reopening after any kind of closure due to COVID, or you've continued to remain open, but you're struggling with how to mark your facilities to ensure physical distancing and relay important information about safety and health as it relates to COVID, I want you to go visit our friends over at MightyLine Floor Tape. MightyLine has some great products for you to mark your floors, whether it be the stand here, the 6 feet distancing, or just floor tape to denote lanes of travel. They have everything you need to mark your facility. So hit the link in the show notes. Visit our friends at MightyLine Floor Tape. They are incredible partners in safety. I can't thank them enough for their support of the podcast. Again, MightyLine Tape for all of your floor marking needs. Hey, don't forget to visit our friends over at Healthy Roster. You've all heard of onsite injury prevention services, right? Well, that's what Healthy Roster does for those with multiple locations and shifts. And they do it affordably. So head on over to Healthy Roster, hit the link in the show notes. Go ahead and take a poke around at the website, dive deeper into the safety ally services they provide.
All right. Welcome to another SafetyPro Podcast Community panel discussion. I've got my mug. I got to get you guys mugs. How's that?
That'll work.
Oh, man, I'm waiting on one.
Wow. Shots fired. All right, then.
He said he checks the mailbox every day.
Was that? Well, yeah, Drew's like, I sit out there every day. It's like you're waiting for your decoder ring.
That's right.
All right. I'll have to send you guys some. But this panel, our discussion today, we're going to talk about how to protect employees in light of this new wave of smash and grab robberies that is impacting retail. It's touching on electronic stores like Best Buy. Even Home Depots have been hit with these types of robberies, certainly big retail. But what's left out of a lot of the news coverage and story is protecting the workers, right? So we're going to get into that. Before we do that, I want everybody to introduce yourselves to the community and others. We're going to share this video outside the community as well when we're done. But we'll start with Drew, just a little bit about your background in case people don't already know who you are.
Sure. Drew Hinton, I'm president and CEO of Aero Safety. We're a safety consulting firm in Glasgow, Kentucky. And my background is 10 plus years as a career firefighter EMT in Louisville, Kentucky. So we've actually, I don't know if you call it the pleasure of responding to some active shooter incidents and training with law enforcement. So looking forward to hearing other input and hopefully we can help out the community.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. And our good friend Shawn, Raffman Rafferty.
How you doing? Yeah, my name is Shawn Rafferty. My company's called SPR Group Solutions, and
What's that? And I have over 25 years of experience in law enforcement, military, security stuff, and I have my own podcast called The School Preparedness, where I try to talk to the average person, teach them how to avoid becoming a victim, how to do things, be more prepared, and in my company, I like to specialize in active shooter response and training. So hopefully I can add some value to this discussion.
Excellent. We'll definitely, yeah, we'll definitely dive into that because that's interesting, Shawn, what you're doing there in that space. And Kyle, how about
Hey,
Kyle?
everybody. My name is Kyle Delman. I'm involved in the safety profession. Obviously, been on the HSE front and in security as well. So HSS, whatever acronym you want to throw. In chemical industrial environments and chemical industries as well. So just that's my involvement, and coming up on 5 years in management involved in this. So been pretty active as of late. And so yeah, I'm happy to do it. It's always good to collaborate with our peers on this and colleagues. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And my background as well, a little bit in the fire service, private industry, some government contract work, and so Shawn, actually, when Shawn and I met, we got into this whole work. We met professionally and became friends over the years. So I'm really interested in the diverse background that we've had and the experiences we've had doing physical assessments, looking at facilities. And so we can kind of probably, bring, especially in chemical facility background, in hardening those facilities, making it difficult for things to take place in those, what can transfer to the retail sector, which is a unique animal because we're used to constantly, and we used to have this battle. Drew, you can attest to this, and Shawn as well with your law enforcement background. But as in the fire service, we want access to facilities, right? We want to be able to pull. As a matter of fact, we usually get our own parking space right in front of the door at most of these retail shops. That's how good we had it. We can pull right up, get out, and go to the salad bar at Kroger and use that emergency lane. But the opposite is true with security and law enforcement. It's all about, here's how you keep people out, and sometimes those two approaches don't work. So in retail, we see this example, and I'll bring a couple examples up here in a minute. But Shawn, I want to start with you because I love how you kind of just glossed over your background a little bit with law enforcement, military, blah blah blah. Okay.
I don't like talking about myself.
Cincinnati police officer. I know you don't, so I'm gonna have to toot your horn for you, you punk. Cincinnati police officer, Marine, right? Private security, including Blackwater, in Iraq. I mean, federal agent, personal protection detail for Secretary of Commerce?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So look, that's you kind of just blew over some of your background and experience. So you had to do threat assessments ahead of certain, visits around the world. So you had to look at all kinds of stuff. What is your take, just high level, on sort of this trend that we're seeing where upwards of 80 to sometimes 100 people that don't even know each other but are organized around this type of event show up and create all this havoc and then leave?
Yeah. So, unlike places where you can actually secure properly, like private industry or more regulated facilities like chemical plants or whatever, it's very hard to protect against something like this because retail stores are open to the public, so anybody can come in at any time. So for something like this is where it's important that the staff are trained properly. And, maybe a good thing would be to hire some outside security, or maybe have some police officers on duties outside to kind of be a deterrent. But, there's got to be some really good forward thinking about this, about, some strategies that these retail businesses need to put in place. But, kind of like what you mentioned, nothing's being talked about with the safety of the employees or even the customers that are in there. And I mean, at that point, they have insurance for the merchandise, so they don't have insurance for the employees, so to speak. So we talked about this on our a little show we did that didn't record properly. But do you want to get into that now, or do you want to just you want to get into some of the stuff we talked about now?
Yeah, let's talk about some of the things you recommended. Yep.
Okay, so what we were talking about is sometimes they put these items, these high price items, they'll put them in the back room. They won't put them on the shelf or whatever, on the display case, because it's a high, expensive item. So what happens then is these criminals most likely know that they have these particular items in stock. And generally, if it's not on the cabinet or on the display case, it's probably going to be in the back. So what happens then is if you have these smash and grab situations where you have, dozens of people in there and they're violent and they know they only have a certain amount of time before the police start arriving. So they have to get what they came in there to get. And, if this means they have to knock over customers, or, pistol whip an employee, or even shoot somebody, they're going to do that to try to get to these items. So if I was a retail business owner, I would not want these people in there for a very long period of time. I'm going to try to get them out as quickly as possible. So in my opinion, if these cases of smash and grabs are really starting to increase in some of these areas, and they're targeting specific stores like the high price, high ticket stores, then maybe it's wiser to put these items to where they can get taken very quickly. Otherwise, what's going to happen is there might be a situation where employees are going to be beat more or hurt more because these people are getting frustrated, or they have to stay in the store longer than possible. And then, if these guys are armed, then you're going to create a situation where there could be a hostage situation. Police arrive before they can get everything out. So, in my opinion, for the safety of the customers, the safety of the employees, try not to have these items maybe in the back room. Maybe have them closer to the display case.
Right.
That way, these guys can just come in, they can get what they need to get and get out. Because
that's interesting, though, Shawn. Because, sorry, I know there's a delay on your end, but that's interesting because it's the opposite of what you would think. Because in retail, it's all about merchandise, and I get it. It's the business side of retail. Theft in retail is huge. It's what drives market, prices for things, the cost of doing business in certain geographic areas, or deciding not to do business in those areas. It's all based on, whether or not we have a potential to lose merchandise, right? And so we're asking these businesses to completely flip the script, if you will, on how they think about loss prevention. And you said, we don't have insurance. I mean, other than workers' comp, I know what you mean. We're not even focusing on worker safety. And I do see some stores taking some efforts that would potentially create another type of situation like you mentioned, which is, moving higher price items deeper into the store. The thought process is, if I'm casing the place, right, and we'll get into that here in a second, I may not want to hit that store because it's going to take me too long to get back in there. But I don't know, when you got, upwards of 80, anywhere from 20 people at a time, I've heard 80 people at a time, they're not hitting small stores. They're going to stores that are big enough where they can all get around, get their stuff and come out. But I don't know that that's a solid plan, and if that's going to work, just moving the purses, the expensive handbags, to the back of the store. Drew, what about you? I caught some when Shawn and I talked about this last week. Him and I was joking about, like, I'm still shocked just from a safety standpoint, even a public safety standpoint, that when I go to Walmart or I go to Kroger, as soon as I walk past that second set of sliding doors, I'm standing in a road. I mean, it's right there. Is there a way to move that zone bollards to keep, like, because these smash and grabs, they're pulling up right in front of the doors, blocking exits from to the parking lot, and then they run in, they come out, and then they leave. They're able to exploit that emergency lane to stage. What are your thoughts on how retail facilities are laid out today?
Right,
in that way.
and kind of going off what both of you all said, they're laid out for marketing purposes. They're not laid out for employee security. They're not laid out for customer security, anything like that. And I noticed, so maybe jumping around a little bit. I noticed when COVID first came out, at least in Kentucky, there was a big push to say, hey, if somebody's not wearing a mask, don't confront them because of the workplace violence issue. They would just because people were getting irate and throwing fits, whatever it may be. But like I said, they're not laid out for employee safety. Kind of like you two were talking about. There's little focus on that. So, is there something they can do? Maybe it's going to take money to to renovate a facility and renovate and stretch out the entrance to the parking lot or whatever that may be. And I don't think employees until their employers, organizations are focused on that until they get hit. But kind of to Shawn's point, I mean, if we're rearranging it and making that decision versus sticking it in the back versus sticking it in the front, how is that reducing our is that going to reduce our exposure from an employee standpoint? Is that going to make us safer to we're not having to deal with it, or is it going to avoid it altogether? Because the big thing is they're seeing that people are mostly shopping online, so they have a better market to grab this stuff, go online and sell it on eBay, Amazon, whatever it may be, and try to sell this right. illegal and illegal products, and then try to make a profit of that, hiding behind a computer more or less. And so, I don't think companies take that as in consideration as much as they should. And Shawn, you could probably speak more to this, but I know, I've done some communication with like Homeland Security with at least in the Kentucky office to where they'll they can give you some guidance on threat assessment or hazard assessments within your facility, and they can give you guidance. I know some offices at least come out there depending on your industry that you're in. If you're in a high risk industry, a chemical or something that's critical infrastructure, they may come out there and do an in-person one to help you out, but at least they give you some guidance on the website to maybe if you want to do your own threat assessment or hazard assessment as far as workplace security and workplace violence, they can definitely help you out with that.
Nice. So there's another type of smash and grab that's very specific. It's not so much retail. It's low volume, high value, which it would be like a jewelry store. So I envision these jewelry stores like a bank would be set up, or even Kyle, like a chemical facility, right? Where we can create some hardening, right? If you think about it, jewelry stores, the cases are lined up really around the perimeter. Maybe you have an island in the middle where there's some cases, but everything's locked up. There's very few items out. Sometimes they even have by appointment only, some of these really high-end jewelry stores on Rodeo Drive, in Beverly Hills or something like that. So it's sort of the opposite of retail. They do seem to have this sort of lockdown mentality to protect those goods. Kyle, do you have, from your background and experience, what do you have examples of things that we've done in industry that might have a retail, some value in retail?
So one of the first things I wanted to chime on was, the proverbial fire triangle that safety professionals always talk about. There's also a security triangle, and you have neither a target or victim, an opportunity, and a desire. So when you're doing physical assessments, that's what you're aiming to do, all these different deterrents to take it away, whether that's lighting or things like that. And then you have this other thing, I forget the acronym, but it's called crime prevention through environmental protection or something like that. And one of the things that the only retailer that really comes to mind that has done this is, how Target has the obviously the Target as a logo, but they have Spot as the dog and stuff like that. I think, or maybe the dog's name is Target, don't know, but they have those bollards at the very beginning, those circular, the inner part of the bullseye, laid out in front. And those serve as a marketing tool for them because it's keeping, with the trend, keeping with the brand image, but also it's providing a physical protection from, people being able to drive up into the store or something like that. But that's the one of the things that come to mind. So that's what a lot of things that we're doing, we're trying to either take out one of those legs of the triangle, the physical security triangle, whether that's looking at, from a protection standpoint, like I'm talking about, like, again, lighting is a big one. We can, you can dive deep into that. And then just overall, knowing the site, zoning the maps, working with your first responders. One of the big things I always say is you don't want to be exchanging business cards with those guys when something goes wrong. So, getting those guys and, getting them involved in whether that's your prevention plans, whether that's getting them to do, a physical security assessment. I know some companies that you can actually hire to try to break into your facility to test your systems, right? So those are some different things.
Shawn. I wanted Shawn to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a customer up in Louisville that does it on a quarterly basis. They'll have somebody, try to break in. But it made me think of, going back to the fire department days, one of the districts I worked at, we had Louisville's FBI office in our district, and it was smack dab in the middle of the Papa John's corporate building. You could Google it and look up the address, but it was in the center inside the Papa John's corporate facility. And so, when they were storing evidence and a lot of, top secret, highly classified information there, and just the amount of measures, like to go know the floor, to find literally in the center of the floor, and the protective measures they have in that facility. The FBI agents all had access to all of the Papa John's facility, but it wasn't vice versa. Obviously Papa John's didn't have access to FBI, but it was interesting getting to tour that and see the measures they had. I know when John Shatner, the Mr. Pop, I guess former Papa John's, whatever you want to call it now. Right. We went out there and toured it because they were building a new, helipad for this helicopter, and it was interesting. That's one of the things we were looking at is escape methods through that. That is an extra escape route if things were to go, security issue. Could they escape to the roof, and then could we get access to them? And so it's kind of going over to the workplace, retail or whatever it may be. How many, if a customer comes in and their customers, I should say, mobs of 80 or 100 people coming in to do these smash and grabs. If your employee wants to exit and leave because they don't feel safe because they think it's a safer route to do that, how many options do they have, right? Is it just that one entrance in the front, or do they have multiple avenues and means of egress?
So Kyle, you brought up a good point. We were talking earlier. I made a joke about this with the bollards. Creating that zone, and I know Drew with public safety concerns, mostly what I joked about earlier at the beginning about access. Like, we're always demanding access. We want front row parking and all that stuff for EMS and everything to get somebody out that maybe is having a heart attack or there's a fire or whatever. Do you see there being a compromise in the code, or realistically seeing where they could take, let's say you got those giant Target balls, or at Best Buy, you got the bollards, but they're within 5-10 feet of the door, right? You could still park right in front of this thing and block the door, run in and come out. Do you see being able to move that out and just redirecting even vehicle traffic further out? And then that way you can make use of like the cameras to get more of an earlier warning. It just makes it increases the amount of time somebody is going to need to park their car, run in to do their thing. And it just makes it less desirable. Like Kyle said, you're taking opportunity, you're kind of chipping away at that opportunity leg of the stool to where maybe they go somewhere else. Do you see like that opportunity? Maybe you would have to cut in another door for EMS only, like an emergency door for double doors to the side that's always locked, but only EMS has access to. I mean, I just see all kinds of issues with getting access to a public, like a store, in that way. I don't know. What do you think?
Drew. Say that again. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Kyle. I know you talked about having EMS, like doors for EMS to the side, and
like I think if you want to chip away at that opportunity leg of the stool, you technically time and distance.
Right.
Shawn and I talked about last week. Time and distance are your friend, right? Move out those bollards, that dead zone, right, where people go out the front door, and then you route traffic around this area instead of having traffic go literally driving right through the front, exit discharge. Do you see there being an issue with public safety codes? Like, I know the reason why we have that drive lane right up by the building. Do you see there being a compromise with public safety services?
Yeah, depending on how they lay it out, yeah. Like you said, I say we as fire, EMS, police, we've always had that front door access, and they will pull right up to it. And so, if we're pushing that back for the sake of protecting our employees and customers and making it hard for them to get into, it is a consideration that we are going to have to. We're also pushing back people that need to get in there. It's causing a delayed response. Sometimes that may serve, because there's different aspects of the public safety. It may serve a benefit to police in some aspect. I know Shawn could probably speak more to this, but that's going to give you a staging area. It's going to give you a area to take cover. But from fire and EMS standpoint, they're not necessarily worried about that. They're, if they're going in during an active shooter situation or during some kind of workplace violence issue, they're going to go in with police. It's going to typically be a couple of police officers, a couple of paramedics, and maybe fire department, whoever it is. But they're not the law enforcement. Like I said, it may give them some more cover, but it is going to delay their speed of their entrance. And so kind of to your point of making these access areas made are specifically for fire, police, EMS, whoever that may be, some other law enforcement. I think that's something that's, maybe employers don't understand, I guess you could say, is they don't understand the need for it. They say, hey, we're already spending a couple $100 on a Knox box. Now you're wanting to spend $1,000 or a couple $1,000 on installing a door or an extra access just for law enforcement and nobody else to use. Right. And so unfortunately, they're looking at it from the money perspective. And like I said, a lot of times they don't, it's just like everything else. It can't happen to me until it does. And so, maybe, like I said, maybe it's using those resources. I can't remember if it was Kyle or whoever brought it up to, making those partnerships with your local law enforcement. They'll come out there and help you. Say, hey, what will make it easier for you all, but also ask them that question. Do you need another extra access, or could we install a door on this, the Delta side of the facility, and just for you all to where you're going to have shelter and you can get in quickly without overcrowding it with public access. Yeah.
So Shawn, and that's what I had you come out do not only for my retail facilities when we own the franchise. My main concern was if there's a robbery, how do I protect the workers? If there's a fight breaks out in the store, I mean, this was just a frozen yogurt shop, but these are things that happen a lot. And I have a 17-year-old kid working behind the counter, right? I mean, I wanted to make sure they understood what they could do and how they could respond and make sure it was comfortable for them. So you helped out a lot with that. But then even in the industrial side of things, you did a physical assessment for me at a large med device manufacturing site. And it was eye-opening, like just like Drew mentioned, zones, access to doors. Not to, I mean, I don't want to turn this into an active shooter, scenario discussion, but that's a great example. And by the way, Shawn has a whole video series that he's made available for the premium members of the community on active shooter prevention and response. Some great information in that video series, like 10 different videos. But what was interesting that you and I talked about was like how you could stage employees, how they're able to talk to each other, because some employees in the back may not know what's happening in the front. And then get into the cameras and whether or not you have loss prevention in there at the facility, at your retail shop. What are some things that retailers can do in that area of staging, communications, and cameras?
Okay, so communication is one of the most important things that you need during an incident, as we all know. So, like for the smash and grab situations, are you guys hearing me okay?
There it is.
Okay, you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
I keep getting these alerts from my connection's lost, but anyway, communications, very important during a time of no. Communications, very important during.
I can hear Shawn. This is the joy of technology.
I can see the the voice transcripts on there, but just can't hear anything.
Yeah, Blaine was like, "Yep," and I was like,
"Wow."
I on my end it's saying Shawn is offline, but I can see him and I can hear him.
Well, one of the downsides of living in the country,
he doesn't want to be seen.
Yeah.
Shawn,
you are in the boonies.
Well, Blaine, can you see me and hear me? Right.
This to heart here.
Yeah. Oh man, this is terrible.
Yes.
Anyway, Blaine, if you can hear me, I don't know how it's going to work, but yeah, communication is one of the most important aspects during a time of emergency. So, and being able to notify your customers and your employees, if there's a situation of brewing, is essential. So, here we go again, lost connection again. So I'm losing my train of thought. So like for a retail type business, having the ability for the store, either the security department, to be able to give a notification that there's some type of situation occurring, such as 20 cars pulling up outside the front entrance and a mass of people running into the store. If there's some type of way to communicate this, so you can't hear me and see me.
Maybe just drop and reconnect.
Me?
I can edit all this stuff out or leave it in because it's hilarious. But Shawn, I will give this to Shawn. So Shawn's doing this. I mean, it's not. I think he cringes when you use the word prepper because that's not what it is. But he's got this homestead that he's building out, and it's incredible the land that he has and all these animals and livestock, and it's really the example he gives on his School of Preparedness YouTube channel was they had this huge ice storm last year, I think, where he lives, and like they had no power for like over a week or I don't know something. So just being able to live like a generator, being able to be supportive, self-sustained, things like that. It was very interesting him going through that and sharing that experience. So he's out in the sticks, and so the internet out there.
Yes.
While we wait for Shawn to jump back in, let's Kyle. Do you have? There's Shawn. Are you back?
Here and see you.
Welcome back, man.
I can see you. You look great. It looks better now. So, Shawn, I think everybody who, in the last couple of years especially, that has had to communicate and connect this way, totally gets it. Don't worry. I should have taken my on-air sign off when you went down. So, Shawn, you were going to talk to us about how we can take advantage of where we place workers in retail, how we can leverage communication for them, and maybe cameras for early warning of some of these events.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, outstanding. So, like I was saying,
Yes.
communication is critical, and either each employee can have a radio earpiece, or you have some type of speaker system in place where there is some type of situation brewing, then you can hit a panic button or hit the intercom and be able to alert everybody at once. So it's just up to the budget of whatever the store has, whatever the business has, as far as how complex they want to make it. But cameras are also great, especially if you can have cameras on the outside of the building that show the entry points and a little bit further out into the parking lot. So if there is a mass of cars approaching, then somebody can have eyes on that already, and then they can automatically alert. I would even go as far as to say if there's a way to lock down the front entrance, to automatically lock it to where, and also put some type of 3M safety or impact resistant film over the front doors. So if they have a locking measure in place and they have this impact resistant film, so if they alert everybody inside that, hey, something's going on, they can either get these people, in the back.
That's all right. So what's interesting is Shawn was talking about the 3M film. We talked last week, him and I were talking about this, about how affordable that stuff is, because a lot of these folks were using sledgehammers, and I'm not talking the display cases inside. I don't care about those. Just gaining access to the through the front doors that were locked. They were busting out front display windows, going in that way to grab things, the high-end stuff that's on display. I mean, if you think about it, it's all marketing and product placement. They want this, even if it's just one or two high-end bags and jackets on a mannequin in a front window, they put that there so you go, oh, they have this, and then that brings you in as a shopper. They were smashing that window and taking it. Well, what happens is others would go in that window into the store. They were pushing people down. They used bear spray on somebody. A security guard was shot and killed. He was murdered. Off-duty police officer. So what Shawn was saying when we were talking last week, I was like, maybe it's expensive to put up ballistic glass and replace all these doors, but there's this low-cost film you can get that it's one of the three legs of the stool opportunity that Kyle was talking about. And that is, if it takes me this long to bust through this window, we're just going to leave, or that's the thought. But to Shawn's point earlier, and Shawn, hopefully you can pick it back up if we don't lose you again. I'm not a fan of this. That's why I was very leery about this discussion on the news about trying to almost making it take longer once they're inside, making it harder for them once they're in. I'm not sure we want them in that long, especially if you create a hostage situation or possible shootout situation or things like that inside that store. Shawn, if you're back with us, go ahead and continue your discussion on how we can stage workers and how they need to be able to communicate.
Sure. Apologize again. Yeah. So communication, either radios or some type of loudspeaker situation, which is probably cheaper and easier. But this all goes into place. They have to have the security protocols in place. They have to have the training. They probably should have somebody that leads that. And going back what you said is, I don't think it's a very smart idea that you keep all these people inside as long as possible, because a panic situation will start to happen. And then when the police arrive and they have their guns drawn and everything like that, then you're going to have a situation where there might be a shootout inside the building, and then innocent people get hurt and killed. And it's just, this is a very unique situation that's happening. I don't think we've seen these smash and grabs like this before, like on this scale. So it's kind of a phenomenon, that it has to be addressed, and there's got to be new measures put in place, new thought behind, new strategies put in place about how to deal with this. But communication is so important, like we talked about.
I want to get to, if we can, I want to get to some of your suggestions because I thought they were interesting based on our conversation. So Kyle, what the chemical industry, or like, anytime you have hazardous goods, things like that, you want to limit who has access to those things, right? And can check those things out and also use them or handle them. Do you think there's an opportunity to, and Shawn mentioned thinking outside the box earlier, do you think there's an opportunity for retailers to kind of rethink the retail establishment, the way we do business with the public in a physical setting, where it's put everything out on the floor, create all these racks, and they got to weave through, make them walk through all this stuff because they'll see more things. It's more psychological and based on impulse shopping. Do you think there's an opportunity to kind of rethink how we present goods to the buying public, the shoppers? And do you think it's wise to limit the number of, and advertise the limited number of high-end items that you have?
So one of the things overall is, well, you guys were talking about earlier, making it more difficult, like especially during, like, again, I know we wouldn't want to turn this into, active shooter thing, but if you have, for example, I mean, the whole goal is you don't want to avoid exposure, just like any other hazard, right? And when you do that, if you go to an industrial chemical facility or a school or a retailer, and he has to go through, a dozen doors or more that are all locked with the lights off and things like that, we make it a little bit more difficult, on that individual to accomplish their goal, which is, to do some type of harm, whether that's stealing or, targeting a victim or individual. But, that brings up an interesting thing, because if you're saying, okay, they can get to those items more accessibly, does that increase or decrease the individual's exposure, in the smash and grab scenario? So that's definitely an interesting question to ask. And then, like what Shawn was mentioning earlier with communication, obviously that's vital in all industries. If you think about retailers overall, there's not very many that actually communicate through, like, whatever it's radio, or have a emergency notification system and stuff like that. Not many that I've seen, at least. So having those levels of communication, and then just diving back full circle, what I was mentioning earlier with the law enforcement, some of the things that we have done, or that I've seen in the past, is you essentially, when you're collaborating with those individuals, you have them come out, whether that's the physical assessment or just doing a HAZCOM training with them. You gotta remember, depending on what time or day it is, it could be a whole different type of first responder crew, just because of shifts. But also, if, like, for example, fire departments, usually they have it staggered off to where if this individual can't respond, then the next one. So, like, for example, just in Louisville, it used to be like Pleasure Ridge would respond, and then you had Louisville Fire. So it wasn't enough to just get one shift of firefighters or police officers. You had to pretty much paint the broad brush and try to get all shifts, and then have other responders, whether that was getting Louisville Fire in, whether that was getting everything. So that's Louisville Fire, or Pleasure Ridge or Lake Dreamland. Since then, there's not a Lake Dreamland anymore because they've consolidated. But the point remains the same, that you're getting all those individuals. So again, you're not exchanging business cards with those individuals, and time is vital in any emergency scenario. You got something demands immediate action. Something that's obviously urgent and serious. So, exchanging business cards isn't the way to do that. So by doing all these different things ahead of time, that's one of the things that you should look out to do.
Well, we call that mutual aid, in the response industry, right, Drew? It's really hard for an employer to know that and
Right.
understand that unless they have a safety professional, and that is able to look at your different facilities and go, okay, where are they located? How close are they to a neighboring county, town, township, city? That it's highly realistic or likely that we would have a mutual aid response. So it's not enough just to say, technically our address is in, like where I live, the city of Kettering. We just have to outreach with Kettering PD.
Right.
There's Beaver Creek, Dayton, there's Oakwood, there's neighboring jurisdictions that are likely to have what we would call AMA, right, Drew, automatic mutual aid, to where we won't even know it if crews are busy on another call or otherwise out of service. It automatically will go to the next nearest response, and it could be the next jurisdiction, depending upon how they're set up. The average store owner is not going to know this stuff. So I love Kyle's point to, make sure you include, who, and ask the questions, who else should we get involved that may have to show up and respond. And I see Shawn's back. We're going to keep going back to Shawn as much as we can on the, and we do have a delay, so I'll let Shawn jump in here when I pause. But Shawn, continue to talk about how important communication between the workers is, and what you were trying to get to before we lost you.
Yeah, so I think it was Kyle that mentioned this about a lot of retail. A lot of them don't use communication assets, and that's true. I mean, some of them do. I think like the bigger ones, like Target, you see a lot of the employees walking around with radios. But
Right.
Simple thing is little handheld radios or an audio system. A loud audio speaker would be great. But, like I keep going back to is if they can harden their front entrance and be able to lock it down, if, at the drop of a dime, just a push button, or use the 3M. Yeah. Basically, what you have to have is a communication tool, whatever it be radios or loudspeakers. Then you have to have a protocol in place, a training in place for the employees to know how to use them or how to give the alerts, what type of alert.
There you go.
Wayne, you're going to have a busy day trimming this up, big guy.
I'm gonna have so much fun editing. I think I'll just let it rip honestly, like this because this is normal. This is it's like real. Behind the scenes. Can Kyle hear me?
Our host is gone.
I'm online, man. I don't know what you're talking about. I was online the whole time. All right, so I was getting to workplace violence standard. There isn't one, right? There is no OSHA. You can't look at the OSHA regulations and say this is the standard for theft and robberies in retail, right? It's all the general duty clause. So it's clear to me that if you hire somebody to work in the store and you teach them how to ring people out and how to greet people, but you've paid no attention, you don't even have anything documented that this is how we place workers. Workers are working in zones, maybe departments, and they have a little radio. And then you touch on security. Here's how we've instructed them to evacuate the building if something were to happen. Your nearest exits. We did a tour. We showed them where they're working, where their nearest exit is. And then the next, they understand where all the exits are. But if you've done none of that, you don't even have anything documented, you're setting yourself up for some serious issues, not just, I don't want to get into the civil stuff, but with OSHA, right? We've seen this happen where companies are cited because they literally did nothing. OSHA doesn't have an expectation of performance, just like with first aid CPR, right, Drew?
Yep.
OSHA doesn't just because you're trained, OSHA does not expect that worker to be able to perform,
Right.
because you don't know how people will react in certain situations. But
Right.
if you did no training, that's what OSHA is concerned about, right? So what are your thoughts on a workplace violence standard, at least a paragraph that says the employer shall have a written workplace violence emergency response, as maybe part of the emergency response plan? So what are your thoughts on that, Drew?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% for it. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I had a conversation with a former coworker. It's been, I guess, about 6 months ago, but he used to be a inspector for Kentucky and Indiana OSHA, and he was telling me about, I think it was after we had a workplace shooting in Louisville. He was telling me about a situation to where he cited an employer for under the general duty clause. But what was crazy was, it was a workplace violence issue, is they had a safe room, but none of the employees knew about it. And so, we're creating these programs, but then are we effectively training them on that? So I think I'm 100% for it. Creating a standard, and like we said, OSHA standards versus voluntary consensus standards have two different intents. But who's gonna, is the average safety manager, director, safety professional, are they qualified to make that assessment, right? So do they need to bring in, somebody like Shawn or some kind of, law enforcement or security that specializes in that niche to help them make those hazard assessments? Of course, OSHA can give you some kind of guidance, and they, with other standards, they can give guidance on here's what you have to have. But, like I said, is the average safety professional going to know how to effectively implement that and how to effectively apply it to their workplace? I know that the healthcare industry is pretty big on focus with that, just because of, irate family members and patients and kind of the issues they get within the hospitals and medical settings. But, I think that, I know NFPA come out with some guidance and standards on like active shooter situations, and they kind of give you some call them JPRs, the job performance requirements. Like we talked about, that's not really what OSHA gives you. OSHA tells you, here's what you have to have. But like you said, the psychological aspect comes into it. I can train you all day long, but when it comes to any kind of workplace violence, if somebody's doing a smash and grab or anything, I don't know whether that person's going to react the way I want them to, or they may freeze up, and that's okay. And it's we have to make sure that they understand that that's okay. We're not. It's just like with extinguishers. Yeah, I want you to use an extinguisher, but if you freeze up or you don't feel comfortable, don't do it, right? I'm not going to force you to put yourself in danger for something you don't feel good about doing in the first place.
Yeah, I don't think we definitely don't want to go down the road of like JPRs like we would in law enforcement, things like that. I mean, there's cases going on now with officers that didn't perform, or that's the whole point of the case. The system will suss that out, but you open up a whole nother door or set of doors when we start expecting a certain level of performance and somebody doesn't. So then that becomes the next level of compliance. It's like, okay, so you have a written plan and you did train them, but they didn't do step 3 and 6. So we're going to cite you. And it's like, I don't think we want to get there. So I like what you're saying is at least have the expectation in black and white. The general duty clause has, I think, OSHA, and this is where I confuse some colleagues and friends, because I mean, there is a proper place for regulation and government in our lives, in our society. And I think the general duty clause, it kind of makes, I'll say, the administration a little lazy. It's like, well, we don't want to go through the rulemaking process, so we're just gonna say that's a recognized hazard of retail, and so you should have done something. We don't know what it was, but we'll know it when you don't do it. It's sort of like fine art, I can't explain it to you, but I know what it looks like. This is an example where I think even just a paragraph that says, no, you shall address workplace violence, i.e. theft, robbery, personal attacks. And there was another story, and I brought this up in a coffee topic on the community this week, and that is Bank of America in New York, they actually sent a memo out, and they're instructing their workers to dress down when coming to work to avoid being attacked and robbed. Don't wear any Bank of America shirts or branded shirts. If that, let's say if you're walking to work, right? And this is an OSHA geek question, right? We know that expected working hours are, do include, for record keeping purposes, for an OSHA recordable injury or illness or event, they include pulling into the parking lot and getting out of your car and walking to the front door. A lot of folks say, oh, he tripped and fell over the parking block and knocked his tooth out. That's not an OSHA recordable injury because he wasn't clocked in yet. We know that's all crap. We know that's your parking lot. They're expected to park there and walk across your property to get there. Now, if it's a shared property in a strip mall, you don't own the parking lot. I mean, there's very, few gray areas, but in general, we get the record keeping standard. Do you see this? Like, okay, now your employer is telling you could possibly get robbed, right? Do you see the scope of workplace safety regulations and kind of expanding to kind of net? I mean, they're already trying to say, the pandemic is work related, and with the ETS, and they're trying to make that justification. Do you see like the same logic being applied to, you make people get on the subway to come to work? That's the only way to get into the city in Manhattan to get to work. So if they get robbed on the subway, you have to report that. I mean, I don't know. I know I'm trying to be silly for silly's sake, but do you see that?
Right. I mean,
any of you?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, it gets back to, and I think, Blaine, you and I had this conversation before about some other post, is, are you there as a condition of employment? Like you said, if that's the only way to get there, right, it's via that subway or whatever method it is. If that's your condition of employment, is they're requiring you to take this. I know I used to work at when I was a diesel mechanic in Louisville, we had a parking lot that was a mile down the road, and they would make you park there, and they would shuttle you from that parking lot there. So, in that situation, that would be covered. But like I said, it brings up a big gray area, right?
Well,
of understanding.
And I think you're right. Time and geography, right? Expected working hours and geography.
Yep.
When people get confused, and I don't want this to turn into a record keeping episode, but I will state this, and I think I know what you're talking about. Even safety professionals are confused with this.
Yep.
If I say, Drew, we're in the office, we're in a meeting, and I say, hey, Drew, we're going to work through lunch. We need the team to get around this project. We have a problem, and we're going to work through lunch. I want you to go down the road and pick up sandwiches for all of us and bring them back. I'll reimburse you. I'll expense it. I'm your supervisor, and I send you down the road to get sandwiches. You leave the facility during lunch, on lunch hours, during lunch break, and you go and get sandwiches, and you fall in the subway parking lot because I'm not going to spend a lot of money on you guys. So the subway is what we're getting. No, especially Kyle.
That's all we get, Brian? Come on.
So he just gets the bread. So you trip and fall in the subway parking lot. Guess what? That is now a work-related incident. I instructed you to go there as a part of the job. However, if you say, hey, it's my lunch break, I'm gonna go have lunch. Oh, all right, Drew, see you later. You let me know when you're back, and we'll pick up this meeting after you come back. And you leave voluntarily the property, and you go to Subway and you fall. Not work related, because you weren't sent there as a condition of your employment. You could have packed your lunch. You could have driven home for lunch. You could have door dashed. We had nothing to do with that.
Right.
So you bring up a good point. Condition of employment. Everybody, and this is where you're saying today the way it's written is you kind of want to look at that. My question is, given the social, political regulatory climate that we see nowadays, especially recently. Can you see that expanding maybe? We see it in other areas of regulation, but with workplace safety, if you have a smash and grab, or I pull up at Walmart, I park in the parking lot because I got to park in the back. Employees have to park in the back, and then I have to walk across the parking lot. If I get robbed, is that, and I'm injured, and it's a recordable injury. Getting robbed isn't, that's not a recordable. Were you injured? Did you suffer any restricted duty or lost time? No, it's just, maybe it was stressful. So maybe there's that. But do you see what I'm saying? How far are we going to expand this?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely try, but like a lot of things is, just like COVID is, they do it after the fact, right? They try to retroact it and try to say, oh, well, you should have done this, but we didn't tell you beforehand.
Yeah. Now, Shawn, Shawn's back offline, but Shawn and I, we were talking about a very unique situation in that you have traveling salespeople, and Shawn and I specifically talked about real estate agents, okay, that have to go show buildings or show houses. And there was and I think that this still happens, but the news, goes in cycles and they pick up on things and latch onto things. There was a time a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, I think actually, before COVID, where real estate agents were getting robbed. People would set up fake viewings of homes that were listed. They had no intention of looking at the home. They were going to rob the real estate agent. So that's work related. You don't have an office, right?
Right.
So you were there as a condition of employment. I definitely see that this is an area that somebody is going to try to put more definition around, right? Certainly like something like Bank of America telling their employees how to dress to avoid getting knifed on your way to work. We need you to get here. And so right. I don't know. I think once the employers gets involved, does that open the door? I don't know. Maybe we need a lawyer on the panel.
I think it's becoming more and more known to the employer that they have to, because if you look at the general duty clause, it's a serious recognized hazard, whether by you or by the industry. And we're talking about this because this is a recognized hazard within retail and other industries. And so now you have the burden of proof from the employer standpoint to prove otherwise, which is going to be a hard battle because it's all over the news. It's an issue. And so that's working. This is now working in OSHA's favor because they can prove, hey, this is a known industry hazard. Why didn't you protect your employees from this?
Yeah. All right. Fine. Let's go through some final thoughts. Kyle?
Oh, I was going to tag on what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and that was essentially the need to further publish and further document requirements for employers and what levels of that. I mean, I think we all know doing emergency action plans that rarely when we're doing these drills does everything go right. I can even cycle back to I was during an interview. I did a completely unconventional interview a few years ago, and we were you got to remember during stuff like this, it's high stress, high anxiety environment. So I mean, when things happen, you almost have to have a fail safe in place where, okay, if this guy doesn't do his responsibilities, like who's the next guy up that's going to fill in for him when something goes wrong. And then I always, when I do trainings on this, I always say high stress, high anxiety environment, help people out, because during that interview, I mean, it was during a corporate site with a construction company, and essentially you could tell that this was probably one of the very first ones that they were doing. But in that time, the guy reported to the assembly zone leader that he was there on 3 different times, and then the guy still missed him. Right. So what I'm getting at is like, okay, now you magnify that in a real scenario. That's where that high stress, high anxiety environment, you got to have stuff that's going to, fall into place when someone doesn't, operate as they were supposed to, you know what I mean? Like it's a hard thing to gauge how an individual is going to react when the thing actually occurs. Are they going to freeze up? Are they going to be all hands on deck, and some of those things like we're talking about is those plans overall. And, even if you think about, whether that's a chemical company or retail, you have the old pump and dump where you're pumping this employee full of information their first week, and then sometimes they're never touching it again. I think one of the things that is most notorious for this is, workplace violence and active shooter. Like the last time you've done it was, 6 years ago when you first joined the company. And I think that's where the requirement should come in, whether that's, I don't know if we should go down the roads of, having refresher, just like a, hearing protection or respiratory requirement. But I mean, if you don't address things, if you don't train on it and you don't do drills on it, like we guys know, there is a, established standard on EAP. And even when we're doing these drills, rarely things go right. So, we look at everything that's going on and, the nation and everything, it's definitely something that needs, momentum and change. And, and then I have one more thought, but you guys have any feedback on that?
No, Shawn talks about that a lot. I mean, I know I mentioned it earlier, but the inside the community, the series of videos that Shawn produced and made available to our members is hands down some of the best material I've seen on this topic, because he doesn't, and I'm going to toot Shawn's horn again because maybe he might have a connection problem still, but he doesn't talk like, even with all of his law enforcement and military and federal agent background and experience, you talk to Shawn and he talks to you like a person. It's not legal. It's not all this military and law enforcement mumbo jumbo and jargon and like, tell it to me in English. That's Shawn. Right. Yeah. And so he talks to employers like an employer. He talks to workers like a worker. And he breaks down what you just said, Kyle, which is this, a lot of businesses don't do it for a very good reason, but having this repetition and making sure that you keep revisiting these things. You just don't do it once and don't touch it again. Think about like how many changes you have in the layout of the facility during the course of a year. Even in retail, you're changing out displays and changing out workflow. And think about an evacuation or in a drill. And to Kyle's point, a lot of us do the drills. Oh, it's a check in the box. I got to do an annual evacuation drill. But where people get in trouble is document the drill. Okay, we did a drill. If you documented at any time that workers had trouble hearing the alarm, they had trouble seeing it. These 5 people never got out because they didn't know there was a drill. And then you did no follow-up. You didn't put you didn't move the strobes or add additional sirens or audible alarms. You didn't address that in any way. That's a compliance issue. You're going to get nailed on that. The whole point of doing the drills is, to Kyle's point, is to see where you have things that don't go as planned, and then you correct that. You have to compensate for that. A lot of companies miss that piece across the board. They check the box, they say they did it, and then hold up a paper when somebody asks, but they have nothing to show for it. Yes.
No,
so.
Sure. I was going to say too, I know we're bailing out here, but one last thing I would like to leave you guys with on this is, the social media side of this stuff. If you talk about that other leg, having a target and stuff like that, that most of these individuals, will do a YouTube comment or a Facebook comment, so there's been many schools and workplaces that have actually hired, social media monitoring companies. And I think that honestly brings into a interesting question, which is how much freedom are we willing to give up on this? Similar to other things in the past, at what level are we allowing the companies and schools to be, invasive, right? If that makes sense. So I think that's definitely an interesting spin off of this conversation.
Yeah, social media monitoring. I know a lot of law enforcement agencies are doing that too, because I think a lot of these flash mobs were organizing online somehow, but it's kind of hard to monitor. Well, I guess there's ways to do it if there's public boards and things like that. But yeah, so I'll pull Shawn's video in. We'll make it happen. I know he's got the video and recording on his end, but thanks guys. This was a great topic. We'll jump into the comments on the community site and make sure we keep the conversation going. And I'll have this video available to the community beginning of the week. I know it's early Saturday morning for us, but thanks everybody for your time. And I appreciate it. And thank you. And we'll do another panel here soon. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Perfect.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
Hey, you too.
All right, there you have it. A long one, but we got through it. I apologize for the audio quality. It was rough, but we're going to continue to have member panel discussions over at the SafetyPro Podcast Community. So if you want to be notified whenever we post any of those videos, you just need to be a member of the community. You could even be a free member. It doesn't matter. Go ahead and join us over there at the community site and take part in the conversation. The link is in the show notes, and I will talk to you on the next SafetyPro podcast.